The biting London wind whipped around Eleanor Vance as she pushed her cleaning cart through the deserted corridors of the War Office. It was 1943, and the city, though resilient, bore the scars of relentless bombing. Every shadow seemed to hold a memory of sirens and distant explosions. Eleanor, a woman in her late 40s, her hands calloused but her spirit unyielding, found solace in the methodical rhythm of her work. Cleaning was a small act of defiance against the chaos, a way to bring order to a world consumed by war. Her route took her to the intelligence wing, a place usually bustling but quiet now in the early hours. She entered an office, its occupant evidently gone for the night, leaving a faint scent of pipe tobacco and stale tea. As she meticulously dusted the desk, her fingers brushed against something wedged between a stack of official documents and a heavy dictionary. It was a small, leather-bound journal, unassuming and plain. Curiosity, a rare indulgence in her disciplined life, tugged at her. She knew she shouldn't, but a sudden, inexplicable urge compelled her to open it. The handwriting inside was neat, precise, but rushed in places. It belonged to a soldier, Captain Alistair Finch, as indicated by a faded inscription on the first page. The entries spoke of mundane daily routines, the camaraderie of his unit, and the ever-present gnawing fear of the front lines. But then, as she flipped through the pages, her eyes caught a series of cryptic notes, dates, and what looked like coded messages tucked discreetly amongst personal reflections. A shiver ran down her spine. This was no ordinary soldier's diary. Her heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Eleanor, despite her humble profession, possessed a sharp mind and an innate ability to connect disparate pieces of information. The War Office had been abuzz with whispers of a potential leak, a saboteur within their ranks, but nothing concrete had ever materialized. As she read further, a cold certainty settled in her stomach. These weren't random jottings. They were a detailed, horrifying account of a planned betrayal, targeting a specific British regiment on the European front. The details were veiled, but the intent was horrifyingly clear. She felt a sudden, crushing weight of responsibility. This journal, in her hands, held a secret that could decide the fate of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of lives. The dust motes danced in the weak morning light, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in Eleanor Vance's world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories like this. The first rays of dawn were just piercing the grimy London sky as Eleanor left the War Office, the journal carefully tucked inside her worn apron. The usual morning chatter of the early commuters seemed distant, muffled by the terrifying implications of what she now carried. Her mind raced, replaying the coded entries, trying to decipher more. She wasn't a codebreaker, nor was she accustomed to espionage, but the sheer gravity of the situation was undeniable. A British regiment, likely one preparing for D-Day or another crucial offensive, was about to be sacrificed. She walked past bombed-out buildings, their hollowed eyes staring blankly at the sky, and thought of her own son, Thomas, serving somewhere in North Africa. The thought ignited a fierce, protective fire within her. This wasn't just about a regiment. It was about every soldier, every family, every life shattered by this brutal war. She couldn't ignore what she had found, but who could she trust? The journal explicitly hinted at a high-level mole, someone within the very walls she had just left. Reaching her small, cramped flat in a quiet residential street, Eleanor brewed a strong cup of tea, her hands still trembling. She pulled out the journal again, spreading it on her worn kitchen table. The notes spoke of a rendezvous point in a neutral country, a series of seemingly innocuous numbers, and a particular date marked with a small, sinister X. She recognized some of the military jargon from her late husband, a veteran of the Great War, which only deepened her understanding of the potential catastrophe. She spent the morning meticulously copying the suspicious entries onto a separate piece of paper, trying to make sense of the disjointed pieces. Each word seemed to scream danger. The more she read, the more intricate and insidious the plot appeared. It wasn't just a simple betrayal, it was a complex web designed to ensure maximum casualties, seemingly to demoralize the Allied forces. The thought made her blood run cold. She knew she had to act, but the how was a terrifying labyrinth. The weight of the secret pressed down on her, a burden almost too heavy to bear, yet she knew, with every fibre of her being, that she could not let it break her. For 2 days, Eleanor wrestled with her conscience and the frightening information in the journal. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford, haunted by images of young soldiers walking into a trap. She considered going to the police, but the journal's hints of an insider made her hesitate. Who was truly loyal? Who could she trust with such a devastating secret, one that could expose her to unimaginable danger? Her mind kept returning to Mrs. Davies, the elderly lady who lived 3 floors below her. Mrs. Davies wasn't just a neighbour, she was a former librarian, sharp-witted, remarkably observant, and, most importantly, discreet. Her husband had been a cryptographer in the First World War, and she possessed a quiet understanding of codes and secrets. It was a long shot, but Eleanor felt a flicker of hope. That afternoon, under the pretense of borrowing a teacup, Eleanor paid Mrs. Davies a visit. The air in Mrs. Davies' flat was thick with the scent of old books and lavender. After a few minutes of polite small talk about the latest rationing updates, Eleanor, her voice barely a whisper, confessed. She laid out the journal, pointing to the coded messages, her fear palpable in the small room. Mrs. Davies, her spectacles perched on her nose, listened intently, her expression shifting from polite interest to grave concern. She took the journal, her fingers tracing the hurried lines. "My goodness, Eleanor," she murmured, her voice steady despite the shock. "This is significant." She examined the patterns, the seemingly random numbers, and the peculiar phrasing. This isn't a simple cipher. It's a numerical substitution, combined with a keyword, perhaps, and the X marks on the dates. That's unusual for a private diary. As Mrs. Davies worked, Eleanor felt a tremor of relief. She wasn't alone anymore. Mrs. Davies, with her quiet strength and keen intellect, began to unravel the first layer of the enigma. Together, hunched over the worn pages, they began the painstaking process of piecing together a betrayal that could alter the course of the war. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil within, but for the first time since finding the journal, Eleanor felt a sliver of genuine hope. Days turned into long, arduous nights as Eleanor and Mrs. Davies worked tirelessly on the journal. They turned Mrs. Davies's quiet flat into a makeshift intelligence hub, using old newspapers, dictionaries, and a wartime map of Europe spread across the kitchen table. Mrs. Davies, with her background in linguistics and a surprising knack for puzzles, led the charge. She identified a pattern in the numerical sequences, suspecting they corresponded to specific pages in a widely published book, possibly even the Bible, often used for simple wartime ciphers. Eleanor, with her meticulous nature, helped cross-reference dates and locations, piecing together the movements of Captain Finch and the possible regiment involved. The more they deciphered, the clearer and more horrifying the betrayal became. The journal detailed a plan to expose a specific troop movement to German forces, causing a catastrophic ambush. The X-marked dates confirmed the timing, now just days away. They knew they were racing against the clock. "Look here, Eleanor," Mrs. Davies exclaimed one evening, her finger trembling on a specific entry. "The key word for this section, it's harvest, and these numbers correspond to specific lines in Pilgrim's Progress, a book Captain Finch mentioned fondly in an earlier, innocuous entry. It's brilliant in a twisted way." With harvest as the key, the messages began to yield their secrets. Names, code names, and exact coordinates started to emerge from the jumble of numbers and cryptic phrases. They discovered that the target was the 8th Royal Fusiliers, preparing for an assault on a vital railway hub in northern France. The betrayal was planned to occur during their final push, when they would be most vulnerable. The mole, identified only by the codename Nightingale, was high up as the journal confirmed their direct access to classified troop movements. The realization sent a jolt of fear through them, but also a surge of determination. They had the what and the when. Now they needed to get the information to the right people quickly. The clock was ticking, and the fate of hundreds of soldiers hung precariously in the balance. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories like this. Armed with the decoded information, Eleanor faced her biggest hurdle, getting high-ranking officials at the War Office to believe a cleaning lady and a retired librarian. The very thought filled her with dread. The War Office was a fortress of bureaucracy, protocol, and suspicion, especially concerning leaks. She knew approaching the wrong person could not only discredit her, but also put her and Mrs. Davies in grave danger. If there was a mole, they would be silenced. Eleanor considered sending an anonymous letter, but the urgency of the situation demanded a direct approach. Time was running out for the 8th Royal Fusiliers. Her only contact within the War Office was a young, earnest junior officer named Lieutenant Miller, whom she often saw working late. He was quiet, but he always treated her with respect, a rare commodity for someone in her position. She decided he was her best, perhaps only chance. The next morning, Eleanor sought out Lieutenant Miller, cornering him in a quiet corridor just as he arrived. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She spoke quickly, her voice low and urgent, explaining about the journal, the codes, and the imminent betrayal, omitting Mrs. Davies's involvement for her safety. She presented him with the transcribed, decoded messages, her hands trembling as she handed them over. Lieutenant Miller, a man accustomed to strict procedures and official reports, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He was polite, but his eyes conveyed a clear skepticism. "Mrs. Vance, I appreciate your concern, but this is highly irregular. A soldier's private journal, coded messages. This sounds like fiction." He glanced at the papers, a polite but dismissive smile playing on his lips. "Perhaps it's a misunderstanding. Soldiers often write in metaphors." Eleanor felt a wave of despair wash over her. "Lieutenant, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. "This is real. Hundreds of lives are at stake. You must believe me." The cold grey light filtering through the high windows seemed to mock her desperation. She knew getting through the walls of official distrust would be harder than deciphering any code. Lieutenant Miller, though initially skeptical, couldn't shake off Eleanor's earnest plea. Her eyes held a conviction that transcended mere concern. It was a desperate, almost primal urgency. He looked at the handwritten notes again. The intricate details of troop movements and names, even if coded, were surprisingly specific. As he walked away from Eleanor, a seed of doubt was planted in his mind. He decided, against his better judgment and standard protocol, to take a closer look. Back in his office, Miller pulled out a military map of northern France. He cross-referenced the dates and general locations Eleanor had given him with known British troop movements. To his growing alarm, the pieces, though still fragmented, began to align with scheduled operations. The 8th Royal Fusiliers were indeed positioned in a sector that matched the journal's vague descriptions for an upcoming offensive. The chilling accuracy of Eleanor's fiction gnawed at him. He knew he couldn't bring this directly to his superiors without facing ridicule or worse, if Eleanor's claims of a mole held any truth. He needed an ally, someone who valued intelligence over bureaucracy. His thoughts turned to Major Davies, a seasoned intelligence officer known for his unorthodox methods and sharp intuition. Major Davies was a gruff man, often at odds with the establishment, but he had a reputation for getting results and for listening to unconventional sources. That evening, Miller discreetly arranged a meeting with Major Davies, choosing a quiet pub away from the War Office. Over a pint of bitter, he laid out Eleanor's story, presenting the decoded notes with a nervous tremor in his hands. Major Davies listened, his face impassive, occasionally grunting. He studied the notes for a long moment, then looked up, his eyes sharp. "A cleaning lady, you say, found this in a dead soldier's journal. Most improbable." He paused, then added, "Which means it just might be true." A faint, almost imperceptible nod from Major Davies gave Eleanor's desperate mission its first real chance. A flicker of hope, however small, finally ignited in the overwhelming darkness. Major Davies, a man of few words but sharp intellect, immediately recognized the gravity of the information. He had been quietly investigating whispers of a high-level leak for months, but without concrete evidence, his efforts had been stonewalled. The detailed, precise nature of Eleanor's findings, improbable as their source might seem, provided the crucial missing link. He knew the mole, codenamed Nightingale in the journal, was someone with deep access, operating within the very heart of British intelligence. He began a covert, meticulous investigation, working primarily through Lieutenant Miller, who acted as his liaison with Eleanor. They couldn't risk exposing Eleanor, or the journal, to official channels until they had concrete proof that would stand up against any counterintelligence efforts by Nightingale. Major Davies focused on isolating individuals whose recent activities or contacts aligned with the journal's timeline and coded details. The risk was immense. One wrong step could alert the mole and seal the fate of the 8th Royal Fusiliers. Meanwhile, Eleanor and Mrs. Davies continued to pore over the journal, searching for any additional clues, any subtle patterns that might betray Nightingale's identity or further details of the plot. They discovered more cryptic notes about supply lines being diverted and communication blackouts planned to coincide with the betrayal, indicating a systematic effort to cripple the regiment. The cold, logical precision of the betrayal was chilling. The atmosphere in London remained tense, the constant drone of air raid sirens, a grim reminder of the war's omnipresent threat. Eleanor felt the pressure mounting with each passing hour. She pictured the young soldiers, many no older than her Thomas, preparing for an assault, unaware of the trap awaiting them. The thought fueled her determination, pushing her past exhaustion. The unseen enemy within their own ranks was far more insidious than the bombs falling from the sky. They were fighting not just for the lives of a regiment, but for the very integrity of the war effort. The mole remained hidden, a viper in the nest, and Eleanor knew they were on borrowed time. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories like this. The meticulous work of Major Davies, guided by the journal's insights, began to bear fruit. He noticed a pattern of last-minute changes to operational orders, all routed through a specific high-ranking officer, Colonel Arthur Sterling. Sterling was a decorated veteran, seemingly above reproach, known for his impeccable record and stern demeanor. Yet, the journal's specific mentions of high-level clearance and resource reallocation consistently pointed back to him. The evidence, though circumstantial, was compelling enough for Major Davies to act. The decisive moment came when one of the journal's coded entries, now fully deciphered, indicated a meeting between Nightingale and a known German agent in a remote coastal village, scheduled for the following night. This was the direct proof Major Davies needed. He assembled a small, trusted team, including Lieutenant Miller, and prepared for an undercover operation. Eleanor, restless with anxiety, received a discreet message from Lieutenant Miller. "Things are moving. Stay safe. D." It was enough to tell her that her information was finally being taken seriously. She spent a tense night at Mrs. Davies's flat, pacing, listening to the relentless ticking of the clock, each second a precious commodity counting down to the planned betrayal. The next evening, Major Davies's team descended on the quiet coastal village. They found Colonel Sterling meeting a man fitting the description of the German agent. The confrontation was swift and without violence. Sterling, caught red-handed, his face blanching, offered no resistance. The pride and the carefully constructed facade of a loyal officer crumbled, revealing the desperate, treasonous man beneath. In his possession, they found a small, identical journal containing a reverse set of codes, confirming his identity as Nightingale and substantiating every word Eleanor had transcribed. The betrayal had been mere hours from execution. The air, heavy with the scent of salt and imminent rain, seemed to sigh in collective relief. News of Colonel Sterling's arrest sent shockwaves through the War Office, a tightly guarded secret that only a select few were privy to. The potential disaster was averted just in time, and the 8th Royal Fusiliers, unknowingly spared from an ambush, successfully completed their mission to secure the vital railway hub in northern France. Casualties were minimal, a stark contrast to the massacre that Sterling's betrayal would have caused. Major Davies, a man of integrity, ensured that Eleanor Vance's critical role was acknowledged, even if discreetly. He arranged a private, unceremonious meeting between himself, Lieutenant Miller, and Eleanor in a quiet room at the War Office a few days later. The atmosphere was subdued, reflecting the gravity of the events, but also tinged with immense gratitude. "Mrs. Vance," Major Davies began, his voice deeper than usual, "your courage and keen observation saved countless lives. Colonel Sterling confessed everything. The details in that journal were exact. We wouldn't have caught him in time without you." He looked at her, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "You did a remarkable thing." Eleanor, still overwhelmed by the chain of events, felt a profound sense of relief. The burden she had carried for days finally lifted. She wasn't seeking accolades, only the assurance that her actions had mattered. I couldn't let it happen, Major," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "Too many lives have been lost already." Lieutenant Miller, his face beaming with admiration, simply nodded in agreement. He saw her now not just as the cleaning lady, but as a quiet heroine. The War Office, wanting to avoid public panic and protect the secrecy of the intelligence operation, ensured that Eleanor's contribution remained confidential. There were no medals, no grand ceremonies. But for Eleanor, the knowledge that she had protected her country and its soldiers was reward enough. She walked out of the War Office that day, not as a cleaner, but as a silent guardian, a testament to the fact that heroism could be found in the most unexpected places. Life in London slowly began to normalize, or as normal as it could be during wartime. Air raid sirens still wailed, and rationing continued, but there was a palpable sense of renewed hope in the city's resilient spirit. Eleanor Vance returned to her routine at the War Office, pushing her cleaning cart through the same corridors, but her world had fundamentally shifted. She carried a quiet dignity, a secret knowledge that both humbled and empowered her. Her bond with Mrs. Davies deepened, forged in the crucible of shared suspense and critical collaboration. They often shared tea, discussing not wartime secrets anymore, but the small joys and challenges of daily life, both understanding the profound impact of what they had done. Lieutenant Miller would occasionally offer her a respectful nod, a knowing look that transcended their professional roles, acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. The journal of Captain Alistair Finch was classified and filed away in the deepest archives of the War Office, a silent testament to a soldier's unwitting warning and a cleaning lady's courage. It served as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers within and the uncelebrated heroes who often stood between disaster and triumph. Captain Finch, though he paid the ultimate price, had, in a way, saved his comrades, a testament to the enduring human spirit even in the face of betrayal. As Eleanor cleaned the deserted offices in the early mornings, the scent of dust and old paper now carried a faint echo of purpose. She sometimes paused, looking out over the awakening city, the grey skies slowly yielding to the promise of a new day. The war was far from over, but in her small corner of the world, a significant battle had been won, not with bombs or bullets, but with intuition, courage, and the simple act of looking closely when others might have looked away. The city, battered but unbroken, prepared for another day, and so did Eleanor, a silent sentinel in the heart of London, her quiet heroism forever etched into the fabric of wartime history. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories like this.